him tell you a little bit about yourself, about himself. And if you joined us late, the first wine that we are tasting is the Latour Sauvignon Blanc. Bobby, take it away.
Right on. Well, let me just start by saying, if I ever do move on from this position at Empire and I need like a really strongly worded cover letter, I think I'm just gonna go to Adam, because that was like such a, and then this man did this and we all love him. Yeah, it was, thank you. That made me feel warm and fuzzy inside, man. So yes, ladies and jelly spoons, like Adam said, my name is Bobby Labartino. Certified Somm, certified specialist of wine, fine wine consultant, and specialist for Empire. Now forget everything I just said and just know that I'm a geek and they hired me to be a geek. And anytime they need someone to go showcase geekdom, they just throw me at it and then I go in. So it's fun. Yeah, I'm really, really excited that Adam came to me wanting to showcase one winery that him and I both get super geeked about, and then trying to figure out a way that we could showcase it next to some things and kind of compare and contrast. So I will get to that winery in a second. Like Adam had just said, the first wine that we're having is the La Doucette Les Tours, but first I want to talk about Sauvignon Blanc just as a grape, y'all. I think Sauvignon Blanc is one of those grape varietals that everyone has heard, right? Everyone has heard of it. You don't need to have any kind of specialized training in wine to know Sauvignon Blanc. Interestingly enough, though, most of us probably know Sauvignon Blanc from an area that is not home base for Sauvignon Blanc. Most of us, our first foray into Sauvignon Blanc tends to be from New Zealand, which is fantastic. We have one that is spectacular that you're trying tonight. And that's great. I am in zero ways knocking it. I'm just saying, historically speaking, that is not where it comes from. Where it comes from is most likely western parts of France. Typically speaking, Bordeaux, and if you want to go a little bit south of that and a little bit north of that, but it's home base kind of historically where it first got its really good spotlight is actually in Bordeaux. Bordeaux is the area that we all know of for red wine, and yet Sauvignon Blanc does very, very well there. As a matter of fact, Bordeaux Blancs, don't worry about like looking for that name specifically, but if you see a bottle of wine that is from Bordeaux and it happens to be white, Bordeaux Blanc, done. That is going to almost always, forever and ever, amen, be Sauvignon Blanc mixed in with another grape called Semillon. There's a third grape that's allowed in very, very small quantities, but we don't even need to talk about it right now. Sauvignon Blanc, though, is a really awesome grape because it grows in a lot of places. And whenever you have a grape varietal that can grow in a lot of places, it offers a really cool opportunity because you get to see very specifically what the terroir of that location does to that grape, right? Like for me, my fast and loose general rule of thumb that I throw out, and I always say that there's exceptions, this is just a blanket statement. In my opinion, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc tends to concentrate a lot more on like grapefruit and some tropical fruit. For me, Sauvignon Blanc from France tends to take on a lot more lemon lime and some really lovely salinity. And then if you go over to like Napa, my goodness, because of how ripe the fruit gets, you're talking like nectarine and apricot and white peach. Right now, those are three very, very different fruit profiles, yet it's the same grape. That's what I dig about grapes like this that can grow in a lot of different places. It really is one of the easiest ways for us to see the direct results of terroir and winemaking. And that just kind of really geeks me out. By the way, I love that Aaliyah threw this together with a couple of these bullet points that are just dope. I love that it got its French name from sauvage, wild, and blanc, which is white. That is also because the vines for Sauvignon Blanc, historically going way back, they resembled a in the wild grapevine. So it makes sense that you would put those words together. Also, Sauvignon Blanc I think we all kind of get into the habit of thinking that because we've had this New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc or we've had this Napa one, we know they don't get super sweet. They do, actually. In Bordeaux, one of the most famous dessert wines in the world is Sauterne. Sauterne is made primarily from Sauvignon Blanc with a little bit of Semillon and a lot of help from this little wonderful mold called botrytis. But that's for another story. Now, Aaliyah, we can move forward to the next one. So let's talk about the first Sauvignon Blanc so I don't just wax poetic like an idiot for 60 minutes and nobody gets to taste wine. So this next one, the first one we're having of the night, right? So let's first talk about the man behind this wine. So if you're looking on the map, which again, Aaliyah did such a fantastic job putting these maps up there, you see where that directional arrow is pointing? So that area of the Loire Valley is typically called the Central Vineyards. The Central Vineyards because you can actually see the Loire River snaking its way up into that green area where the directional arrow is. This is the spot where it actually stops and kind of turns, relatively speaking, on a dime and goes direct due west and goes all the way out to the Atlantic Ocean. So this area is called Central Vineyards because if you look at it, it's kind of smack dab in the middle of France. Now, this area, the Central Vineyards in the Loire, is known for two towns. I can't believe I just did two like this, like I'm an idiot. Two towns, right? Pouilly-Fumé and Sancerre. These two towns actually straddle both sides of the Loire River in like the same exact little spot. Now, remember that when we talk about old world wines, wines from France or Spain or Italy, typically, they're not going to tell you what's in the glass. They're not going to tell you what grape is in it. They're going to tell you where it's from. And then they're just going to expect you to know what grape varietal that is because, I don't know, they're being French about it. But Pouilly-Fumé and Sancerre are these two famous towns that both specialize in Sauvignon Blanc. Sauvignon Blanc does incredibly well there. A lot of that has to do with the soil, and a lot of that has to do with the weather. Like most things in the world of wine, so much comes down to the terroir. The soil type in this area is really known for a famous type of clay and limestone called Kimmeridgian. Kimmeridgian actually starts where we are in Pouilly-Fumé and heads due south, actually shows up in Chablis, funny enough. But this Kimmeridgian clay and limestone tends to also have little chunks of flint. And that flintiness really brings about a calling card in the minerality of the wine. Now that I've said all of that, that was just to establish this. The Baron Ladoucette, if you go back hundreds of years, and I mean hundreds of years, within the town of Pouilly-Fumé, two people are going to show up a lot. The Ladoucette family and the Comte de Lafond. These were the two people that had, or families that had the best holdings, the best sites in all of Pouilly-Fumé, right? Now I'm just establishing history. These are the two people, these are the two families that had the best spots. Now skip forward really far to 1972. The Baron Ladoucette takes over for the Ladoucette family vineyards. He is also a direct descendant of the Comte de Lafond. So this guy, his bloodlines are truly throughout the heart of the Central Vineyard area. And his family historically has been really running the helm of the best areas. Still to this day, he makes insanely good Sauvignon Blanc. For instance, in 1975, 3 years after he takes over, he decides to do a reserve bottling of his Pouilly-Fumé. And remember, whenever I say Pouilly-Fumé, I'm just saying Sauvignon Blanc. So he does this private reserve bottling, and he puts it in this fancy bottle that mimics the heavy glass bottles of the 18th century when his forefathers first started farming the area. And he bottles it as a reserve and sells it as a reserve. Not a big deal. We hear about that all the time. But that was actually the first reserve bottling of a white wine in the Central Vineyards in its history. So he starts off by doing things a little bit differently, right? Then he starts to spread his wings geographically. The problem is area Pouilly-Fumé and Sancerre, they have been really negatively affected over the last, I would say 10 years, but really the last 7 especially. Hail and frost have really destroyed vineyard yields like years in a row. I think 15, 16, and 17 or 15 and 16 just wailed on them with hail. That means there's less wine to make. That means that wine gets more expensive. Now, Ladoucette wines already fetch a pretty penny. And now you're talking about losing yields. So those bottle prices are going up and up and up and up. And the Baron didn't want to price himself out of everyday drinking capacity. Well, to do that, he's got to get a little creative. So if you're looking at this little directional arrow, all he did was spread out from the Central Vineyard area, and he went a little bit west into an area called Touraine. Touraine is another area within the Loire that offers, typically speaking, much more simpler wine that is much more made for youthful drinking. It's supposed to be very easy. Well, the Baron says, great, I'm going to go into this area where I can get land cost significantly cheaper than I can in Pouilly-Fumé, and I'm just going to give this wine my attention. And so he starts off by going to a gentleman by the last name of Rachelet, who is a winemaker in Touraine. And he says, hey, I'd like to work with you. I'd like to make Sauvignon Blanc from this area because I want to be able to make Sauvignon Blanc with my ideas, but at a more approachable price point. And that's how Les Deux Tours was started. Les Deux Tours, by the way, is the two towers. I wish that was a Lord of the Rings reference. It's not. I mean, and I really do. Like when I saw this, the two towers, like, oh my God, does he like Tolkien? No, not that. Really, it comes from the soil types and the valley, the area where he is. So Loire Valley was kind of known as the Valley of the Kings. Royalty used to live in the area. Some of the most expensive wine in the world used to come from that area historically. But also the banks of the river over time have actually gotten quite steep and has presented itself with some really, really awesome soil types. Remember what I said about the Kimmeridgian with chunks of flint? Typically, that's all in Pouilly-Fumé and Sancerre, and then head south towards Chablis, but there actually is a couple of small areas within the area of Touraine that has that. That's what we're working with here, because he really wanted to still have some of that flinty minerality within the wine. So that brings us to this wine, you guys. We have the Les Deux Tours Sauvignon Blanc, made by the Baron La Doucette, getting away from his Pouilly-Fumé roots and setting up shop in Touraine. I'm going to shut up for a quick second so I can try a sip of this.
And I'll jump in. Touraine is an awesome region for daily drinking Sauvignon Blanc. Sancerre these days, prices have kind of gone through the roof. Pouilly-Fumé is really tough to find in the States for good producers that isn't astronomical as well. So Touraine really has become a great spot for Sauvignon Blanc from France that is at a price that will rival most New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs on the market. So I love that we ended up here in Touraine. I love that we are going to taste a really cool Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand next so that you can see the differences in styles of the countries and what they represent. What's your thought, Bobby?
For this wine, what's lovely about this wine as we're moving is that just like Adam just said, you're going to see winemaking techniques that are going to be sort of drastically different, and yet different sides of the same coin, right? La Doucette is always going to farm sustainably. He doesn't want to spray any kind of pesticide or herbicide because the man is smart enough to know that you can't nuke your vineyard site and expect your vines to have any kind of longevity. And for French winemakers like La Doucette, they prize older vines. And the only way you're going to do that is if you protect the vines. But his winemaking is very traditional for this area, right? So it's stainless steel ferment. He's going to control the temperature by having a colder fermentation. So he keeps some of those delicate aromatics. And then he allows the lees, if we remember, that's the yeast cells. They go into the fermenting liquid. I'm going to turn sugar into alcohol. CO2 and SO2 in small amounts are going to come up, and voila, there's wine. But once I've done my job as a little yeast cell, I fall to the bottom of whatever fermentation vessel I'm in. And after all of them fall out, for lack of a better term, it looks like a sludge. But it's the most wonderful sludge you can imagine, because we found out a very long time ago, the longer we let this juice hang out with that sludge, the more we're actually pulling up a lot of complexity, a lot of creaminess, a lot of things that help what we call the mid palate to not be watery or lean. So this gets 5 months of lees contact to allow it to have a little bit more texture. And Adam, I have to tell you, when I tried this is the first time I've had this wine in a little bit. I appreciate the minerality that I was expecting, but also, and I do not say this negatively, I want to kind of get in front of this because we use it as in a negative light these days. There is a smokiness that I get to this that I really, really appreciate, that I know tends to come from some like upper echelon Pouilly-Fumés. So I'm kind of glad to see that with the volume turned on here. It's a lovely thing to notice in the wine, and it makes me appreciate it just a little more.
Yep. I think it's fantastic. $23 a bottle. We got a little bit of it. Get it while we got it. And oh man, I forgot about this the whole time. I'm so sorry. I got so enthralled with your talking that I forgot to hit the next slide. So my apologies.
I read all those. Except I do want to do one quick shout out that every time Adam is nice enough to let me jump on here, I typically have to do a shout out at least once. I'm guessing this is Aaliyah that did pairings. Is that a yes? Yeah, dude, you always come up with the dopest pairings. Just so we know this, in general, folks, Sauvignon Blanc, right? If we're talking about classic pairings, typically this is a wine that you can utilize to kind of get you through vegetable dishes or green dishes, because there is a green note that comes out in Sauvignon Blanc. Chemically, it's called pyrazines or methylpyrazines, and it brings about a very grassy thing, or kind of a green herbaceousness. I sometimes get, from New Zealand, I sometimes get jalapeno, or I get cilantro. Well, those kind of things are going to be elevated by a dish that is like a salad or any kind of green dish. But also, she was smart enough and a badass enough that she puts goat cheese on here. So goat cheese, ladies and gentlemen, if you look up in a dictionary for like classic pairing of French Sauvignon Blanc, it's going to have a direct line to goat cheese, because it's a good example of high acid as a really lovely compliment. So Aaliyah smashed this out of the park as usual. So way to go there, dude, on the pairings.
Thank you. Goat cheese and Sauvignon Blanc is one of my favorite things just to generally like eat. So then, oh, but wait, we can fry it and make it a fritter. If anybody's ever been to, Cafe Intermezzo, they have fried goat cheese medallions.
It's amazing. It's classic. Yeah, guys, the restaurant in Midtown Atlanta called Echo, they also do fried goat cheese in this ball with this little like honey reduction. It's insane. But I digress. So everybody, take a sip of this last one, your last sip if you got it, and we'll move on to Love Block, which is just a really fantastic story that Adam and I have been talking about. And I'm really glad Adam wanted to showcase this winery. It's a winery we don't get a lot of wine from, but I'll explain why in just a second. Let me just, then I have my lovely assistant, which is my wife, doing a nice, lovely Vanna White interpretation as she pours wine.
Shouldn't have done it like that.
No, you didn't. So we'll be here all week, by the way, folks. The 6 o'clock show is different from the 9. So let's talk about Love Block. Let's go to New Zealand, and let's start by talking about my favorite thing to mention. I wish I could do this because I usually do this in person. Virtually, just to yourselves, raise your hands if you've ever heard of the wine Kim Crawford. It's a very, very popular Sauvignon Blanc. Very popular. I'm sure if I could see everybody, most people would have their hands up. Now, this is my favorite part. Keep your hands up if you knew Kim Crawford was a man, not a woman. Hey, there we go. I got Aaliyah. So funny enough, guys, Kim Crawford is a man. That is Kim and his wife, Erica, in the picture. So real fun story about these two crazy kids. So Kim met Erica at a wine festival in South Africa. Erica was actually a medical student who really wanted to kind of get away from the medical field and found that she liked wine, ends up going to a wine tasting in the Stellenbosch region of South Africa, meets this crazy guy who had just been getting into winemaking. They fall in love. They got married. She moves with him over as they start up this idea. Now, this idea that they had to do wine in New Zealand was at the time crazy, but now we've all heard of it before. Here's what they did. They actually started what they call a virtual winery, what we know of today as the term a garage winery. Basically, it means a winery that doesn't have a crush pad, doesn't have a winery, and doesn't have vineyard holdings. They are purchasing fruit and making their wine either at a custom crush pad or at somebody else's facility. But it's a really great way to break into winemaking if you don't have a lot of money. Like, for instance, this will be funny to Adam or anybody else that really understands the business. They started with $20,000. That was their investment. They had 20 G's. That is an insanely small, like the old adage in winemaking is how do you make $1 million in winemaking? You start with 10 million. Like it's very, very difficult, but they did. So here's the funny thing. And actually, Adam, I just read this today in an article that I think is awesome. I'm going to go forward and backwards. I'm going to be like a Christopher Nolan movie really quick. When they were starting up Love Block, right, they were cleaning out their house in their old spot, right, before they moved into this really amazing area overlooking the Awatari Valley in Marlborough. So they're cleaning out their house, and Erica finds a notepad, like a desk work notepad. And it was their original notepad where they drew up their ideas for a winery for Kim Crawford. Y'all, no joke, the bullet points of it said this: start a winery brand, build it, sell it after 9 years, take that money and start our own project with our own land. Y'all, they did that to a T. So Kim and Erica end up building the brand Kim Crawford into this behemoth. Like, you know, it's in every grocery store, it's in every gas station. I mean, it was a ubiquitous wine. You just couldn't fling a dead cat without hitting a bottle of Kim Crawford. Now, at this time, after about 9 years, it was 8.5, but I mean, come on, y'all. They sell it. They sell it to a wine conglomerate that then got purchased by a bigger wine conglomerate. But their payday, not too shabby. Kim and Erica came away with $50 million from that sale. So, hey, in the immortal words of Forrest Gump, well, we don't have to worry about money anymore. One less thing. So they're like, let's take this money and do the next bullet point on our list. That was for them to do their own thing, their own way. Kim and Erica had always believed really firmly in organic farming. They understood that regenerative agriculture really was the only way forward. I'm not going to get on too big of a soapbox, but Adam or my wife can tell you that it's a real big thing for me is farming and understanding that it truly is the way forward for us as like a, species. So they go and find an area in Marlborough. Now, Marlborough by this point is completely built up. I mean, Marlborough is this tract of land. You see the little arrow. Marlborough is at the northern side of the southern island of New Zealand, right? So New Zealand, 2 little islands. If you're looking at a map, it's the furthest south and the furthest east you can ever go for winemaking. I know we're in a globe, but you know what I'm saying. So with this, they find an area sort of perched above Marlborough. New Zealand is incredibly mountainous. And so you can go right above the area called the Awatari Valley. And basically they found an area that was about, I think it was 250 meters above sea level, and they're looking over Marlborough. And they were able to get a small chunk of land. I think they spent $8 million in the first 2 years, turning this small chunk of land into an organic vineyard. The reason why I threw out that number was not just to be like, ooh, 8 million. It's to show you one thing that I'm sure Adam and Aaliyah and everybody else at Fermented will bang over the head, and that is farming organically is expensive. It's very, very labor intensive, and you are getting diminished yields. Like there is less of your sellable product, and it takes more effort to do. So it's an incredible double whammy. And one big thing I will say about New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc that is mass produced, I will do one little jab because I can't help it. So in the area of Marlborough, if you're doing commercial bulk winemaking, right, here's what you're going to do. You're going to have your vineyard go to the frickin' ocean. You don't care. You're going to maximize as much of the land as is humanly possible. Then you are not going to do what's called dropping fruit. I always do it to being like, if you're a truck trying to get up a hill, if it has too much weight, the truck's not going to get all the way up the hill, right? So the hill is ripeness. So what we'll do is in most vineyards that are run organically or just run smartly, they will cut some, like midway through the season, they'll cut some fruit and they'll be like, okay, only 2 clusters per shoot, only 2 clusters per, we'll just do that. We're doing that to make sure the truck of ripeness gets up the hill and over. You want to be able to get ripeness, but they don't care about that for commercial. They're just going to go have as much yield as possible so we can have as many grapes as possible, so we can have as much bulk juice as possible so we can make wine. Problem with that is you're not getting any ripeness. The grapes they're not ready. And that's why you get poor wine. Lovelock does not do that. They spend an incredible amount of money renewing their vineyards because you had to start planting things that were indigenous there before they got there. So they can start having what's called more biodiversity in the soil. The more you have that, the better vines you have. And in the long run, the better wine you're going to have. But in the short term, y'all, it's a real bear. It's a real bear. So Adam knows this very well, but this is a winery that does not produce a large amount of wine. All that is just to get away all the weird stuff. Now let me focus on the really cool thing. It is wackadoo how they make this Sauvignon Blanc. I'm really glad Aaliyah pointed this out because I was going to spend like way too much time on this. Okay, so yes, they're certified organic. I love that she threw that in there and it shows you the actual name of their vineyard. It's the next bullet point that is wackadoo. So here's what they did. They recognized that sections of their vineyard needed more specialized attention, and they had spent enough time as a couple tasting wines that they recognized a very specific way to do this to bring about the wine they wanted. So here's what they do. 35% of that vineyard gets harvested by hand, right? And it's a specific area that gets harvested by hand. Once it's harvested by hand, they are then separated by lot and put into a rotating vessel of concrete egg, 2 amphora, and multiple neutral French oak barrels. Okay, that's just for the hand picked. For the 65% that gets machine picked, it goes directly to temperature controlled stainless steel, and then 5% of that goes into oak. Y'all, I used to work with a winemaker in Oregon named Chris Williams, and his old adage was, I love to make wine the intentionally difficult way. You could very easily interpret this as Kim and Erica are a little bit masochistic because this is an incredibly difficult way to make wine. So why do it, right? Why go through the whole rigmarole? It's because every single thing that's listed there and every single thing we just mentioned brings about a slightly different nuance in the wine, right? And over time, they figured out that X amount of salt and X amount of pepper and X amount of cumin and a pinch of paprika gave them the dish they wanted. That takes time. It takes incredible patience. And for most wineries, the winemaker doesn't have that kind of time and are not afforded that kind of patience. This was the reason Kim and Erica set out to do this. They wanted to spend their own money to buy their own land, to build their own facility, to make the wine that they thought was the truly best interpretation of their terroir. That is a beautiful thing. And it's a thing that I get, I just think is wonderful because not many people have that opportunity. So to pair with this wine, I love that you put in citrus marinated chicken specifically, because I do love the citrus back and forth. Adam, I'm going to take a sip of this wine really quick because it's been killing me that I haven't had a sip of it. But I hope you guys are all enjoying it because it's crazy how they make this wine.
Yeah, it's an awesome little wine. It is a crazy project. Oops, now I went too far. It is a really awesome project. We had their Pinot for a while in the store, and it was very popular. And the Sauvignon Blanc, I think, is so unique and really shows the creativity of Kim and the quirkiness of Kim at the same time. You know, we know very well at Fermented that our dollars support people. And part of the reason that we only carry family-owned brands of wine in the store is because we want to support families, farmers. We want to support people who are passionate and are doing it because they love the land, they love the people, they love the product. And every dollar that you spend with us goes back to these people. And this is someone we love supporting. And you can kind of see a snapshot of why that is.
Yeah. One more little fun anecdote I have about Kim that I just think is really drives to the heart of what Adam just said and why people like Adam want to support people like Kim. So when Kim sold Kim Crawford, as worded in the contract, he literally sold his name. For the rest of his life, he cannot make a wine that says Kim Crawford, an alcoholic beverage. That literal term was sold. So Decanter, a prominent wine magazine based out of England, was doing an interview with him last year and said, oh my gosh, that must really, that has to get under your skin, right? That you know for a fact the rest of your time in the world making this thing that you love, that you can't put your own name on it. Kim's answer was very pragmatic but also beautiful. So Kim said, hey, I wanted to make wine with my wife in an area that I chose, with land that I owned, making wine in the way that I wanted. The way I could do that was to have my name on that contract. Of course I'd do it. Like, Like there's no hubris involved in it, right? You remove the ego of it. And he was just a man who said that I don't care. Yeah, by all means, have a field day with my name. I just want to make wine the way I want to make wine, and do it in a way that is, in I think all of our opinions, the correct way to make wine. And so that's why it's super dope that we at Empire have places like Fermented that understand what this wine is and have curated an audience, like every single person on this call, have curated an audience that also understands this and that gets it. And so I couldn't think of a better home for this wine. So I'm so glad that we get to try it tonight. Speaking of, Adam, I've already poured my next one.
Oh, here we go. Pinot Noir.
Well, guys, we don't have to go far.
Block.
Yes, because we have to go far, guys. We're doing Love Block again before we deter. This is the other one, their other wine that they make is Pinot Noir. So let's go through these awesome bullet points so that because they're awesome. So yes, Pinot is one of the most ancient varieties of Vitis vinifera. That's the species of grapes that make wine. And yeah, started in Burgundy, y'all. Burgundy, that is home base for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Like that is the area. And that's also why I think so many of us that love wine focus so much on Burgundy, is there's so much history there and there's such incredible wine there. And it's also why the old wine drinking adage is, it doesn't matter where you start in the world of wine, you're going to end in Burgundy. And Pinot Noir is the big boy red out of that area. I'm not trying to crap on Gamay. Gamay is lovely, and you know I love it. But Pinot Noir is the big boy grape. So most likely it gets its name from the French words of pin and noir, because it is a black-skinned, deep purple, but kind of a blackish skinned varietal. So this is one of very, very few red grapes that is made in red, rosé, white, or de Pardee, the eye of the partridge, right? And sparkling wines. But it's the last bullet point that Aaliyah put on here that I am A-okay talking about with firsthand knowledge. So I got to make Pinot Noir up in Oregon at a biodynamic winery. Love it. But I got to work with 13 different vineyards, right? All of them were certified. And then there was our state vineyard. And we specialized in Pinot Noir and Riesling, actually. So that's why Riesling is my favorite white grape. Don't at me about that, because Riesling is phenomenal. And I will go 12 rounds with you about why it's amazing. So Pinot Noir, just in case we all understand this, Pinot Noir wasn't a grape any of us cared about this millennium. If you go back in America, specifically in America, if you go back to the year 2000, no one was really caring about Pinot Noir whatsoever. And actually, and this is quantifiably accurate, you go to 2004. 2004 is the first time Pinot Noir really gets a jump in American markets. And that's because of the Paul Giamatti movie Sideways, the movie that put Pinot Noir on the map and very honestly tanked the Merlot market, and it still hasn't recovered. So Pinot Noir, but it is talked about in the movie, and then I found it to be true years later, is incredibly difficult to make wine out of, because the grape itself is super finicky. It is very, very picky about where it grows. It is very, very picky about how well it can grow. It's very susceptible to a bunch of different diseases because it's thin-skinned, easy to break, wants to have mildew because the leaves around the fruiting zone tend to grow exponentially. And when you have a whole bunch of leaves covering the grapes during the season, that's just a breeding ground for mold, right? Because it all gets humid in that area. Also, it's finicky when it's being turned into wine. There's a lot of ways you can go wrong. So Pinot Noir is a real bear, but when it is done right and when it is treated right in the vineyards, it brings about some of the greatest wine in the world, and definitively is the most expensive wine in the world. Hello, Domaine de Romanée-Conti. That Pinot Noir, if you go across all vintages going back to the beginning, averages out to about $13,300 a bottle. That's Pinot Noir, y'all. So Pinot Noir, like I said, is very, 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 very picky about where it grows. But here's a couple things it really wants. Needs cooler climate, desperately. Needs good rainfall in the winter, then needs the faucet from Mother Nature to shut off in like late July, or that's in the Northern Hemisphere, because it's very, very susceptible to mold. So there's a whole bunch of things that have to go right for Pinot Noir to grow. Funny enough, New Zealand is an area that Pinot Noir does quite well. Not everywhere, in very specific areas on the northern and southern island. So for us with Love Block, we're going to go to another vineyard that they own, which is all the way south. Do you guys see on the very bottom of the screen, there's an area that says Central Otago? That's where we're going. That's where this Pinot Noir from Love Block comes from. I think we can go to the next slide. But for this wine, for their Love Block Pinot Noir specifically, right, so again, Aaliyah did a bang up job giving us the name of the actual their estate where they have this. Now the next bullet point I wanted to touch on. So it says cold soaked for 5 days. So a cold soak can be a very important tool when making Pinot Noir. So climate areas are very important for Pinot. And a good rule of thumb for all winemaking is, and this is general, again, general, colder areas typically make lighter body wines that have higher acid, right? Well, great, that's right in the wheelhouse of Pinot. But you do need to have some concentration of color or fruit so it's balanced. So it's not just acid with some minerality. There's got to be fruit and body and structure so we can really make a complete picture. Cold soaking, especially Pinot Noir, works very well. And here's what you do. We all bring in the grapes day of harvest. We bring them in and we put them into whatever vessel we want to put them in. Then there's different ways that different winemakers do it. You can either, you can touch the top with dry ice to keep it cold. You could put it into a temperature controlled stainless steel. But here's all you're doing. You're not letting the temperature get to a degree that fermentation starts. Right? So we're going to go under that threshold. Wherever the threshold is, that here starts fermentation, we'll keep it under here. And the longer we let the juice and those grape skins hang out in a cold environment before fermentation, you're actually still going to be extracting things at a slower rate, right? We all know that when you put a tea bag into ice water, it takes longer to become iced tea, but in hot, you can steep, and you got it, right? So we know that if we keep the temperature cold, we can extract anthocyanins for color and some tannin for structure, but at a small degree, in an easy way. So that's what we do. We cold soak for 5 days. Then after that, then we allow the temperature to rise up, which kickstarts native yeast fermentation, which is, again, I'm sure you guys have been on these calls. You know, Adam has brought this up many times, right? Yeast particles in the air of the winery and literally on the skins of the grape will just kickstart fermentation. It's the most awesome thing, you guys, to just see a vessel that you've been taking care of for a couple days, and then the next day, once you've allowed temp to come up, you just, oh, I see activity in here. It's the coolest thing. And then the pairings on this are pretty awesome. So Pinot Noir, first of all, especially lighter bodied Pinot Noir, like both of these are actually, go really well with fish. Don't let people deter you from the, oh, fish, it has to be white wine. Not at all true. And nowadays, we've kind of done away with the majority of those old adages because we have found so many exceptions. Pinot Noir is baller with salmon. I love it. But this Pinot Noir, because there is a little bit of structure to it, because we allowed the cold soak to go 5 days, there is enough on it that it can handle something like lamb or a leaner protein like roast chicken. I loved everything about this. Also, I love that she put in mushroom barley soup. If you allow Pinot Noir to age, or really most red wines to age, after a long period of time, when the primary fruit strips away and secondary and tertiary flavors come out, a lot of people talk about truffle. A lot of people talk about this mushroomy, damp forest floor thing. So that would be an awesome play there as well. So once again, air high five to Aaliyah. So I'm gonna try this wine really quick because it's been a couple of vintages.
Yeah, it's really delicious, and it's got weight, it's got complexity, it's got depth. This is a wine that you can lay down and age for 10, 15 years. It's great with food. It's great on its own. It's really, really delicious.
Oh man, the acid is in a lovely, lovely place. So like, if you've ever seen me talk, period, you'll know that I really love higher acid wines because A, I like having wine with food. And acid literally activates your salivary glands, gets your mouth watering, but also just because, to me at least, and anybody on this call, you feel free to disagree, I like high acid wines because to me they invigorate my palate instead of fatigue them, right? Like I can drink wines that have higher acid kind of all day. Like, you know, there never gets a point where my palate is dead and I can no longer taste anything, like a lot of super oomphy big Napa Reds. And I'm not in any way dissing Napa Reds. Napa wines are spectacular. It's just they have a time and place. And for me, I prefer wines that are much more like this. But man, oh, I like how this is drinking tonight, you guys and ladies. I'm loving this.
And it's got just that little bit of bitterness on the back end that keeps you coming back for more. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's move merrily along to the last wine of the evening. And actually, we don't have to travel all that far. So we're actually just moving up from New Zealand and going to southeastern Australia. Specifically, we're going to a little state within the 6 states of Australia called Victoria. Victoria are some of the better cool climate areas in Australia. Now, before a lot of us get misconceptions in our head about Australia, yes, the wide area of Australia is desert, like just desert that can in no way sustain, I don't know, life, let alone vineyards. But there can be a common misconception. Not all of Australia is like that. In fact, fun fact for the kids at home, Yarra Valley within Victoria, which is where the winery we're doing now, Yearing Station, comes from, actually is a cooler climate across the year than Burgundy and Oregon. So 2 other areas that we know of for Pinot Noir and that we think of as cooler climate, this area is actually a little bit colder on average over the year, which I thought was kind of impressive. And the winery we're talking about is Yearing Station. Yearing Station has changed hands many times over the years. It's actually just the story of the property itself is crazy to me. You have to go back to 1838. 1838 was when this Yearing Station, this property was planted. It was planted by these 2 brothers that were from Scotland. They were it's either Ryrie or Riri. I don't know, but Riri sounds too much like Rihanna, and so I went with Ryrie. So they're these 2 brothers. They plant in 1838. And by the way, they planted 40,000 acres. That's a real number, y'all. They planted 40,000 acres. Still to this day, it's the largest property within Victoria. So they plant in 1838. They plant 2 great varietals none of us have ever heard of and none of us will ever drink. One of the varietal is Sweetwater. I have no idea. Anyway, skip forward, right? Skip forward about 50 years. 50 years. The property has already changed hands once. The winery was built, a carriage house was built, and a bunch of renovations were done for the time. And then, strangely enough, in the 1880s and 1890s, this winery had international acclaim. It won the Grand Prix International Wine Tasting in Paris. It won Best Australian Wine of the Year like a bunch of years in a row. Like, this thing had some serious acclaim to it. Then 1900 comes. There's an economic downturn within the area. The land changes hands again, and then changes hands like 5 times in 50 years. Everybody kind of doing worse than the previous owner. The land itself kind of falls into disrepair, not really doing that great. 1960s to 1990s, property changes hands again and starts going through renovations, but not quite to the point that we need it to. It's not until a family from Australia, a very, very wealthy family, I might add, the Rathbone family, buys the property. It's in 1994, I believe, and that's where everything turns on its head. So they completely redo the facility while keeping the structural bones. They really wanted to keep a lot of the history of the property without just washing it away. But they did incredible technological advances, especially over the last like 15 years. Y'all, they have done nutso stuff when it comes to like cutting edge, high tech viticulture. And by that, I mean this, they're not spraying anything. They're not using any kind of like high tech chemical. No, I mean, they have drone routines that go over the vineyard property and is able to scan for water deposits. So they know on a row to row basis, the rows that need X amount of water versus Y, or they can also look at soil property plot by plot to see if there is a cover crop that will work better here versus a cover crop that will work better here. The amount of money and technology that they've really poured into this facility has been really, I mean, incredible. And it was kind of at a daunting scale. And yet it's what happens when you have a very wealthy family that happens to be passionate about winemaking. It's one of those few situations where it ends up really, really great that you have this wealthy family. They weren't worried about the bottom line. They were worried about what can we do to renew this property. So this is their Yearing Station Pinot Noir. Thank you, Adam. You read my brain. So again, you're going to notice something if you skip down to the third bullet point. Cold soaked again for 5 days. And if you look at the color, we are getting, if we're talking on the relative scale of the globe, of the planet Earth, southeastern Australia and New Zealand aren't, relatively speaking, all that far away. So it's really lovely to see this sort of climatic through line that they found that 5 days of cold soaking tends to give us enough color and concentration and structure. But it's the second sentence, hand plunged twice daily. So what that is, it's also called punch downs, something I am intimately familiar with. So it's very basically, I'm going to quite literally take, like, I promise y'all, it looks like a plunger. Like, it looks straight up like a plunger. I'm going to take that and I'm going to plunge down all of the solids, all the grape skins and seeds that have risen to the top during fermentation. That's called the cap. I'm going to plunge it down, and they do it twice a day. They're doing that for two reasons. One, you don't want those seeds and stems and skins to get too dry, because then you have to worry about bacterial and fungal issues. So one thing, we want to keep the cap wet. The other thing is, the more times I do this, the more times I'm reintroducing those skins and stems to the majority of the juice, which is going to only exacerbate pulling out those anthocyanins and those structural polyphenols. Boy, I'm using way too many big words, Bobby. So pair this with smoked salmon, roast duck. Amen, roast duck. I love doing roast duck with a really awesome Pinot Noir. But I did want to bring this up one more time. This is also goes into French barrel and is matured in French barrel that is used for 11 months. So you're really going to see what I love about barrel aging with Pinot Noir when it's neutral barrel. It doesn't impart flavor. The vanillin that gives you a lot of characteristics, it's already been leached out. What you're just doing with neutral barrel is what I call, or what a lot of people call, rounding the edges. And that's a weird concept to wrap your brain around, but it's really an ability to not make the wine so linear, where it's not just like acid, and then it comes through and I get a little bit of fruit and then it's gone. And it's all elbows, right? You want to be able to make this wine more of a whole mouth experience, where it kind of spreads out in your mouth before heading down the old gullet. And so what we have found is that neutral barrel really helps round those edges. And so I love that they, again, use the money to purchase enough barrels that they can then utilize for a barrel regiment. Not everybody can afford to do that. But this is a really awesome Pinot. It's one that I really love. And I'm going to take a sip of it real quick, Adam.
Yep. Thank you, Bobby. It is dynamite. And I think, so you said that Yara Yara was the second coldest growing area for Pinot. Is Central Otago the first coldest growing area for Pinot?
That is actually something I need to look at again, because it confused me. Central Otago is south of Marlborough, yeah?
Yep.
Part of the Southern Island. And yet, and this could be an elevation thing, and yet when Kim talks about that estate, he talks about that he can get Pinot Noir riper there. He gets to the ripeness that he wants, which to me indicates either he's I guess maybe higher elevation with good sun exposure, or it's a little bit warmer relatively speaking. And if that's the case, is a warmer area of New Zealand colder than a cold area of Australia?
Possibly. I know I read somewhere along the way that I thought Central Otago was the coldest growing region for Pinot Noir. I could have made that up in my sleep as well. I do that from time to time, as I dream up things that I read in books that don't actually exist. But
Well, hey, they don't
that
mention,
makes life fun.
New Zealand. When he talked about the cool climate there, the only thing that was mentioned is that the area on average annually is cooler than Burgundy and Oregon. They never mentioned you would go to New Zealand.
Yep.
But I did think it was impressive because I think a lot of people just have in their head Australia, desert. And you're like, no, there's some really lovely, cool climate areas that produce exquisite wine.
Yeah.
Anyway, I know you have things to do here at the end, Adam, but I just wanted to say what I always say when I finish these things, y'all, and that's strip away the romanticism in winemaking that's sort of like intrinsically bound to it. And if you strip that away, all of these people, y'all, they're farmers. They are just farmers that are working their land, doing their best to leave the land in better shape than when they found it. So please don't ever be guilty about buying a bottle of wine. Please support these people because these people are not corporations. These people are people. And so, Adam, thanks again. I will sit back and let you do your thing.
Absolutely, Bobby. Awesome. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. If you didn't know, Bobby's background comes from theater and sports newscasting. So he is well suited for these types of venues and events. All the wines were amazing. I had a lot of fun. This is one of my favorite parts is when we find out who the winner of our tasting was. Man, I always hate it. This is always the hardest part. Bobby, you have to vote too. Lauren, you have to vote too. You can make it up if you want to, Lauren. Whichever story you liked the best. And then just a couple notes while you're casting your votes. For those of you who have been waiting for Petroni to come in, it is finally here. It only took 2 months, but we finally have a little bit of Domaine Petroni. So if we owe you bottles, please come let Aaliyah know in the chat function and come pick them up in the store. I know Stacy Craig, we've got an outstanding bottle that we owe you that has been paid for. I believe that Timmy's pre-ordered 4 bottles. And that's all I could find in my notes. So if you were one of those people and we missed you, I apologize, but we have some Petroni in stock if you would like. As far as pricing on these wines, I didn't mention all of them. I'll go through the list. We've got 23 for the Baron, 25 for the Love Block, 31 for the Pinot Noir from Love Block, and then 21 for the Earring Station Pinot Noir. So all great values, all really good price points, all very drinkable, delicious wines. And if you would like any, again, you get a 5% discount on here. If you're not a part of our wine club, 10% if you are a part of wine club. And you can pre-order through the chat function. You can order them. Actually, they probably won't be online yet because I have not put inventory in. And you can also pick them up in the store and just mention that you are on the Zoom tasting to get the 5%. Aaliyah, how are we doing on our tallies?
I need your vote.
Yes, you do. And I'm still trying to decide what I'm going to vote for.
It was really hard, man. I wanted to do like 1 vote for my palate and 1 vote for my heart.
I know.
I was like, oh my God, I definitely voted 2 for me for Love Block, Sauvignon Blanc. But because I love the story. I love what Kim does. I love the wackadoo way he makes it. But my palate wanted to vote 4 because I love that friggin' Pinot Noir. It's very difficult.
It is very, very difficult.
Steven says, Adam, you vote for number 1.
Thanks, Steven. I did love I loved all of them equally, actually. It's really hard. And I know I can't do that because I tell you all you can't do that every week. I'm going with Love Block Pinot Noir for this one. Okay.
Well, then drum roll. The winner is the Baron.
The Baron!
A significant amount by landslide.
How much did Baron get?
Baron got 7 votes.
Wow, that is awesome. The Baron is a hit. That is wonderful to know. I know we had some pre-orders for Baron in here, and we do have some, and we can get some more of all of these. None of these are out of stock or potentially out of stock anytime soon that I know of. I think we should be able to keep these ones in stock for a little bit of time. So if you want it, just let us know and we'll get it for you. Awesome. Wonderful. Again, thank you all so much, Aaliyah. Thank you for all the slide decks and putting all this stuff together and keeping me straight. Bobby, thanks for taking time out of your schedule to come hang out with us. Lauren, thanks for giving us your husband for an hour. And thank you all for taking the time out of your busy days and schedules to hang out with us on Zoom. I do have a couple of upcoming things that I wanted to go ahead and announce. We are having our very first natural wine experience festival. It's going to be like a mini festival. It's going to be on June 13th, Sunday from 1 to 6. So put that on your calendars. It's going to be awesome. We're going to feature just natural wines. It's going to be $35 a person. You can come hang out. We'll probably have about 40 different wines that we're tasting that day. And it'll be an awesome, awesome day.
Take an Uber. Where? Right there? Right from
yes, take an Uber. Definitely take an Uber. I also wanted to mention next week we're going to be tasting some canned wines. That's going to be a lot of fun. There will be no personal tasting kit because they're all small formats, and we're going to have some great canned wines for you. I'll put up that lineup later on this week. Also want to remind everybody Saturday flights when the weather is nice. We're doing flights on the patio from open to close. You can come enjoy 4 wines on a beautiful day. And I think this Saturday is going to be just as beautiful as last Saturday. And then after that, we've got Kelly from A Cork in the Road. She's going to join us and share some of her favorite wines of the moment. And then I have another announcement, but I'm not allowed to make it yet. I think we need.
Do you want me to stop recording right now?
No, because I'm not going to make it yet. Just a teaser. I can't do it yet. We are legally bound to not say exactly what's going on at the moment, but know that Fermented is expanding. It's going to be a lot of fun. So stay tuned for further details of more Fermented fun coming your way very, very soon. But for now, put June 13th on your calendars. We want to see you there. Next weekend, canned wine, or next week, canned wines. Kelly Cork in the Road after that. If you have time, go online, give us a review. They always help bring in new customers and bring new people to experience the wonderful wines that we carry for you guys. So thank you again. We love you. Thanks for
Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you, Bobby. Great job.
Everybody have an amazing rest of your Wednesday and have a great Thursday. And we'll see you this weekend. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.